Happy Thursday, everyone, and thank you for attending another Andrew Joseph PR curated webinar. Today, we are with two of my absolute favorite people in the industry, and we're talking about coaching and the different levels of coaching. What is coaching? What stage do you need to be at in your business or your career to seek a coach? What are the different things that you learn? Cheminne, Taylor Smith, I am proud to say I started coaching with in February and was one of my last pieces of travel before all of us have retreated to our homes. And anyone that I have shared that I've worked with Cheminne, I've called her the business coach whisperer, because the things that I learned, I mean, I've been in business on my own for 14 years now. And you know, the things that I learned right before COVID were fundamental things that have helped me grow my own business during this time. Now, Melissa Mittag is a longtime friend and a former client. We've had adventures in Paris and London and all over markets in the US. And she has pivoted to a new business in this time. And I'm going to let each of these women introduce themselves and tell a little bit about their background. And then they'll have a roundtable discussion that I know you're going to enjoy, because even in planning this, there was a lot of fun had. So thank you very much for attending, and I'm going to leave it over to these absolute industry luminaries. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew. That was super nice. Do you want to go first, Melissa? You go for it.
Sure. So my name is Melissa Mittag. I'm the founder of Collier and Company, a very boutique business strategy and communications firm dedicated to working with interior designers, product designers, and other creative folk to move their businesses forward. I have about 35 years worth of experience in our industry. Yes, I'm an old lady. I worked on the product side for many years, most recently the last, say, 20 or so in the hand-painted wall covering arena. And most recently, I did a stint as the director of brand management for a large interior design firm based in Hilton Head, South Carolina, the J. Banks Design Group. In February, I decided that it was time for me to really go out on my own and do the thing that I'm really passionate about, which is, of course, helping other businesses succeed. And lo and behold, 3 weeks later, hello, my friend COVID. It's been a really interesting time. I've actually had to rely on some self-coaching, as well as really tapping into the expertise of other people like Cheminne to get through this. It's been sobering, it's been hugely informative, and there are huge silver linings to be found here.
That's a great way of putting it. Thank you. I think that's absolutely true. I think both of us have been in the industry, the home arena, long enough to have seen a lot of ups and downs. And we know how we can respond to them to kind of smooth the path a little bit, so it isn't so much like a roller coaster. So I have a varied background. I've worked in media, retail, and the design arenas. I've worked in publishing for books like Elle Decor. I was the VP of marketing for the High Point Market. But what I like to specialize in is I like to do creative thinking and idea generating. I like to strategize for new ideas and plans, and that can include branding, that can include licensing or relationship marketing, promotions, that type of thing. But I really love looking ahead for people and trying to find creative paths for them. So that's really what excites me. And that can include everything from trying to come up with a new business plan for you, helping you redefine your goals, working on branding, like I said, marketing strategy, etc.
So Cheminne, you know, how in this last little time have you seen the world and your clients changed since March, when everything kind of went a little crazy?
It did go a little crazy. I think everyone froze at first.
Yeah.
I think that was just the general knee-jerk reaction, because when in the world has anyone ever experienced anything like this, right? So I think there was a moment of deer in headlights where we all kind of went, whoa, what is this? And, I think the good thing is the entire world froze. So it wasn't like some people were passing us by to any extent. But now I think they decided, let's make a plan for how we're going to live in this new reality. And that changed everything in the home world, didn't it? Because
Sure.
suddenly the home became the hub of everything. Everything that we normally did in our lives outside of our home is now being done in our home. So my clients are swamped, which means that I'm pretty busy too. I have some clients who have never in their lives been so busy. Other clients, that I had one client really that isn't as busy, and it's the particular area that person lives in. Because there are some different changes happening across the country too. But for the most part, right now, the home is hot. It's where everything's happening. How about for you?
Well, 100%. I think, crisis and opportunity are concepts that many people might consider as polar opposites, but really they're not. I think it's important to understand that sometimes you do need to kind of go to ground for a minute and kind of regroup. And then if you are able to gain some perspective, which is where some strategy work or consulting or business coaching can come in, I think you can sort of reset things. From the outset, it's important to understand that coaching, business coaching, as opposed to personal coaching, is really about optimizing and maximizing what's already there. And I think that some people had to take a really hard look at their businesses and realize that it's not that there wasn't a there, but that what they thought they were doing had somehow over time shifted a little bit. And so now here we are in this moment of forced pause, forced reflection, where even today, we don't really know what's going to happen next year or after the election or with the economy or anything for that matter. And so it's been wonderful to be able to strategize like creatively. What if this happens? Then we would do that. What if this other thing happens? How would we approach that? If we do this and it fails, well, that's not really a bad thing, actually. That's just more information so that we can figure out which direction to go. So I'll be very honest, as I usually am. I began my business with an anchor client who, unfortunately, a few weeks into the pandemic, decided that it wasn't the right time to work with me. And so that was very disappointing and very difficult. But what it did is really lit a fire under me. And it made me understand that I couldn't have a one-size-fits-all business, that it really needs to be small, boutique, tailored to exactly what it is the client needs. So it's all about relationships. We're always saying that. That's our whole industry. But I think people have really taken the time to work on their businesses rather than in their businesses during the last couple of months.
I agree with that. And I think that one thing that a coach can be really good at for your business is that if you are busy, we can be the people that kind of look up above and look out and help you see what's coming next, so you're prepared. Because just because you're busy now, as we all know, doesn't mean you'll be busy in the spring.
Right.
And if you aren't busy right now, the same type of thing happens. Sometimes we, again, freeze like deer in headlights in those types of situations, and it helps to have a coach redefine what your goal is and where you're heading, and to really help you identify trends. I mean, in a way, I feel like what has happened with the pandemic sped up a lot of trends that were coming anyway.
Yes.
They may have been very far future, but a stronger focus on home and family, being comfortable with buying everything online, focus on health and well-being and biophilia, nature-based design. Like, we were already moving towards all of those things. I think the dial was just turned way, way up. And so what we can do as coaches is help you look ahead and say, what's coming next and how can you respond to it? That is the same question you should be asking yourself, whether you're super busy right now or you're hearing crickets.
Well, it's so funny because there's a quote that popped into my head, and I really wish I knew who said it, but basically saying that you don't have time to work on your business is like saying you don't have time to program the GPS before you start driving. And I think that really hits the nail on the head. You know, it is so easy to become paralyzed when you are incredibly busy, and also when you're really slow. And the thing that is important to realize is that there's a momentum here. There's a movement here. Right now, everyone is at capacity. I don't know what other catastrophe we could absorb. You know, it's been such a challenging time, but there is so much in the future, so many opportunities coming, so many changes to our business and to the home sector. People really, as you pointed out, have been looking at their four walls and saying, why don't I paint? Why don't I change this? Why don't I call my designer? For product folk, you know, we need to look at how we're designing our product, our furniture pieces. What kind of fabrics can we use? What new technologies are there in terms of you know, making sure that everything is cleanable and bleachable and antibacterial. And so it's
how much function can we add?
Yes, exactly. How much you know, I will be honest, you know, I come from a very heavy residential luxury side of our business. And so for me, it's all about how can we make it more conducive to feeling good in our home, being in a workspace that is inspiring and nurturing to us. And also, how do we integrate technology into what we're doing? I mean, I have traveled a lot over the years, and I have really enjoyed being at home. And I'm hopeful that going forward, yes, I still want to go to Paris, of course, but like that I can do many of my meetings using Zoom and some of the other technologies that we have. Do you feel the same way? What is your take on that?
Well, I've been working from home for a while, a long time. I even did that when I was at El Decor.
Okay.
I was not in New York. I was here in North Carolina. So this is not a new world to me, but I do see so many people embracing it if they don't have young kids at home. So here's the thing. If you've got kids at home trying to do school and you're trying to work, that's a whole other ballgame.
Oh, totally.
So I'm lucky enough not to have that situation. But I do agree that whether you want your kids to get back in school or you yourself want to work in the office occasionally or at least see more people, I mean, I think we all like to do that. I do think that the way that we think about our home has completely changed forever, no matter whether we want to step out of it or not. So those outdoor rooms are critically important, the well-being rooms, whether that's a gym, meditation room, you know, having home offices for everyone in the family and not just the primary person is something that we really have to think about as well. So there's a lot that is definitely going to continue. But then too, we also have to look at other trends that may not be so happy to look at, but I always encourage my clients to look ahead and to face, you know, what's coming, because when, I think you said this the other day when we were talking, Melissa, when you face the worst case scenario, it takes the sting out of it a little bit. If you can plan for it, if you can look ahead and say that might happen, so I need to bank a whole lot of cash right now, that's something you should probably be doing, because there's not a lot of people who are going to tell you that the economy is going to be fantastic next year. So your fantastic roller coaster ride to the top might slow down, might drop. You just need to plan for all of those scenarios. And that can be scary, but on the other hand, if you plan for it, it's definitely not as scary. So we just need to be open-eyed about what may be coming.
Well, exactly. And I mean, the truth is we don't know exactly what's coming. We know that there's a range of possibilities. And I'm a big believer in a contingency plan. It's particularly because I have a tendency to get a little anxious. So the way I work on that is to think, okay, for 10 minutes, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Mhm.
Okay, I could lose my house. Well, I wouldn't lose my house. I would sell my house before I lost my house, you know, that sort of thinking. And in terms of a business, you know, what other questions apart from the economy do you think that our clients should be asking themselves now, especially when things are so unsettled?
Well, let me give you the big one. What is your goal?
Right.
Because here's the thing. If there was ever a time in your life to try something new, to experiment big, to go ahead and try to fail, as we've talked about before, this is it. Because the thing is, everyone's in the same boat. When have you ever known that to happen? Where there are a lot of businesses that are going under, or a lot of people deciding they want a different career path, or a lot of people changing up the way that they do business or the services that they offer. It is the perfect time to reinvent yourself. And that could be anything from, I just need to clean up my business and make my processes as tight as possible and really understand my financials, whatever, so that I come out of this with the cleanest business possible. I'm marketing the heck out of myself so that when things turn around for me, then I'm ready. Or is this really what I want to be doing? It's a
Right.
great time to ask yourself that question. Is it a time that you want to pivot or adapt to something else, add a completely different service? And also listen to what your clients are telling you. They'll tell you what they want and need and what's coming before
Well,
pretty much
sure.
anything.
No, sure. And I think sometimes, you know, you get so involved in the business that you're actually not listening.
Correct.
You're doing the job, you know, you're functioning, you're executing, but just as we are all changing, your clients are changing.
Mhm.
And more than just, you know, oh, now I need to redecorate my house or I need better furniture. Everyone's mindset is a little different. And it's been a humbling experience for everyone. I don't think anyone has been fully insulated from what's been going on, because it's really not just a financial issue. It is really emotional. It's a cosmic sea change, I think, for people. And so what would you recommend that a client does now to build a foundation that
Well,
is
I
going to
think
be solid next year?
I think that you, like I said, relook at your processes, look at how your business runs, look at what you do and how you do it, how you work with employees if you have any. Do you need employees, you know,
Right.
or do you want to move to more of a contract kind of scenario? But for me, it's really about asking them the fundamental questions too, because don't you think sometimes that coaches operate in a way like therapists? I think you said that to me, that your clients have sometimes acted that way, but that's because it's a very emotional time. It's a very, very stressful time, and it's facing a fear. You know, we all have those fears about what's in the future, or about our businesses, or about our ability to do it. And so to have somebody that is a coach that you're talking to, that is not part of the emotional side of what you're going through, and can help walk you through it and let you see a path forward, whether it's to change your business, adapt your business, get out of the business, whatever, I think is really helpful. So I like to make sure that the building blocks are in place. If this is what you want to do, it's time to look back at the basics and make sure that you've got everything set up so that when you come out of this world, this new reality, whatever you want to call it, you're set up for success already. And pay attention to how your services may need to change, how the way you charge may need to change, because the world has changed. How about for you? What would you tell your clients?
Well, I mean, very similar to what you've said. I mean, I always, you know, address the financial side of things, and literally, you know, that's a core need that we all have. So if there is any kind of issue fiscally, it's like, okay, do we need to just, you know, bank everything now and photograph projects at another time? Or, you know, what's going on here? Because people do, you know, right now people want to try to move forward in spite of, you know, anything else that's happening. It's really, you know, we're exhausted. We want to like just go now. And so I really take a hard look at that. And I also spend time assessing sort of, are you where you still want to be? You know, has your niche changed? Have you changed? What do you see happening with your little niche that you're working in? Are there things that we can optimize there? Are there things we can shift around a little? Has this time, made you interested in working in another sort of niche, another area with different kinds of clients?
Mhm.
I was working with someone last night who was talking about, possibly needing to have some help in her business. She's a solo proprietor. And she kept saying, well, I didn't want to ever have employees, and I didn't want to be more than me. And I was like, wait a minute, why are you saying you didn't want? That's in the past tense. Why don't you say, I don't want? That's now. Are you sure you really don't want? I know you didn't, but maybe you do. And she was like, wow, I need to think about that. You have to just be really, a great listener. I'm not a therapist, and I don't want to be a therapist. But, the truth is we all need help. It's emotionally very difficult. And just as if I had a problem in my business that I didn't know how to solve, I would immediately think, who might know about this? Who can I reach out to who's maybe experienced this, who can give me some guidance? You're always going to go, to the smartest person in the room who can help you. And I think it's very important to also create a relationship with someone who's coaching you or strategizing with you where you are accountable. So I do a lot of work on accountability. That doesn't mean that I'm emailing people, you're late, you were supposed to do this. It's not that. It's really empowering other people to remain accountable to their own desire, their own choices, their own goals and objectives.
I have been known to check in with somebody and say, you said you were going to do this, did you do it? In fact, I'm looking at the participants, and there's one on here that I just recently did that with.
Oh,
Because,
really?
yeah, because I think you do need to be, we all need accountability. And I think we do get too bogged down in the day to day. And it's nice to have somebody not necessarily get into the nitty gritty, but to check in with you and say, I just wanted to see how you're doing, because when we talked last, maybe this came up or you were thinking about changing things. What was your decision? What did you finally come to? It's nice to have somebody check back in. I mean, and I think that does sort of give them a sense of accountability that I'm going to email them, because when I've done a consulting session, I do check back in. So I have a 1 month, 3 months, 6 month, and a year. I also do a week sometimes. It depends on what we've talked about. Or I send an email and I ask, you said this is what you were going to do, or we talked about a certain amount of homework or whatever you want to call it. Did you do it, and how did you do with it? Because we do need that accountability. The thing is, you can work with a coach on a consulting session and then walk away and never do another thing, right? So we all can get into that issue where it's like, I didn't really want to do that work, and that sounds really hard, and I'm just going to leave that over there, especially when you're dealing with financials. I don't know why, but that's what, no one ever wants to do that. So I think that if we're checking back in just in that sense of accountability, or setting up some form of accountability for them, to your point, that's gold.
Yeah. Well, I often start a relationship with a lot of homework.
Mm-hmm.
It's written homework.
Right.
It has to be handed in.
Right.
And that is, well, part of it is because it's actually really the most efficient way to communicate the basics about your business, so that we don't have to spend an hour talking about that. I could just read it and then I have a sense. So, but the reason I actually continue for a little while to have people do work at home and send it to me is to train them to do what they've said they're going to do. Not for me. They need to be accountable to themselves. So, they wouldn't break that promise, for example, to me, but then of course they would easily break their promise to themselves. So it's really just to try to shift it a little bit, because it is so easy to get sucked into, something different. I mean, guilty as charged, actually, So when you are going to make an investment to work with a strategist or a business coach, you really have to go in, understanding that that's what it is. It's an investment, but it's an investment in you.
I agree with that entirely. Do you feel like there has been any sort of silver lining with the pandemic?
For me, Yes, I have. There have been many. I mean, on a personal level as well as on a professional level. I mean, I will say that I'm not doing exactly what I thought I was going to be doing in February. I'm doing something very different, which is actually really exciting. So for some clients, you know, I'm doing a little bit of communications work, and for another client, I'm actually doing pretty much a lot of public relations, which is not something that I had planned for, you know, back in February, but is really what is needed in his business at this particular point. I have felt that it has given everyone permission in many ways to be much more real when they show up. You know, I've had business meetings where people have come, you know, in sweatpants with no makeup on. I love that because at the end of the day, you know, we all have our bumps and flaws and whatnot, you know. I think that because this is something we're all experiencing, like globally, there's been a certain level of empathy that I've not seen before. And so I find all of that incredibly reassuring. You know, this is the only time in our lives that anyone alive today, including my 83-year-old parents, have had this concentrated time where we've been forced to slow down and quiet, even if it's just for a few weeks or a month right at the beginning. And so we really are experiencing many of these things together. So we can draw a lot of parallels and we can get much more information because everyone's out there. And you mentioned a problem again that you're having, someone has an answer. And I just find that to be really, you know, the biggest silver lining.
I agree with that. And I think, again, if there is an opportunity to change your business or to change what you are doing, period, this is it. Because in a way, you have that cloak around you where everyone is going through it. And so it's not like you're going to stand out, whether it's in the industry, et cetera. But you know what I think is really great too? For the first time, when I have new clients come that haven't worked with me before, they are finally understanding that they don't necessarily need to do some of the things they think they have to do to be part of this business. I think some people thought, well, I have to have a licensing line because that's the next step. Or I see all these people on social media that are part of this show house, so I should be part of that. Well, there are no show houses, or they're all virtual, most of them.
Right.
Tips Bay. But people are having to rethink how all those models work anyway. And it's making them step back and realize that sometimes that's smoke and mirrors and it isn't necessarily the right path for you to go down. And they're able to think more critically about it from the standpoint of, does that really make you money? Is that really where you should put your attention? And, you know, we're able to get more quickly to the point of what are your goals and how can we reach them, rather than, well, everybody else looks like they're doing that and maybe I should do it too. So that's helped a lot. It's stripped away a lot of the veneer.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I'm usually very direct in the initial conversation, which is like, is this a business issue or an ego-driven issue?
Right.
Is this, you know, because, and I don't mean to be judgmental. I mean, if it's ego-driven and you just want to be all over the place in a household name, that's totally valid.
Hey, no harm, no foul. Ego's good too. I agree.
Exactly. But usually it begins in the ego. I want to, you know, be on the AD 100, or I want to be in every magazine, or I want. But by the end of the conversation, it's really, I want to stabilize my pipeline. I want to make sure
it begins in the ego and ends in the bank account.
Exactly. So and it's been much easier to have that conversation now than before. And I mean, really, if you think about it in the big scheme of things, it's really only been about 6 months to have this sea change, you know, in our industry. The other thing that I really, you know, have to say that has made me feel so positive is how generous people are. Even when things are difficult and challenging, there's a certain generosity of spirit in our industry that I think, we've seen through the pandemic, we've seen as we work through social justice issues. It's, we are incredibly lucky to work in such an environment that is supportive and encouraging of, things that are hard.
I agree. And that even includes among coaches in this industry. I think it's funny because people always tend to expect us to be competitive. And well, I'm not. And I don't think many people that I work with are either. And we tend to talk to each other. So whether that's a Gail Doby or a Kim Cutable or pick anybody.
Yeah.
And to all talk to each other, and we admire each other, and we all are different in our approach. So it's not necessarily that there isn't room for all of us. And I think the interior design industry is the same way. It's something I've always liked about it, is that people tend to support each other and work with each other, and try to help each other. If you're not part of the interior design community, which I'm sure most people on here are, I love watching the camaraderie on there, the questions that are asked, and people who completely open their books to each other and really share a lot. So that's something I love about the industry. So I think we've hit 1:30 and we already have one question in the chat.
Yes.
So I'm going to
read it.
Yes, it's Jeffrey Johnson, who I love. Hi, Jeffrey. It says, what do you think the #1 requirement for designers to take advantage of for year 2021 will be?
I think the most important thing is to make sure that you have stabilized your business. Batten down the hatches right now, just as a precaution. There's a storm brewing. Let's use that analogy. We don't know what it is.
Which direction it's going to take.
Right, exactly. So we may dodge it completely, but if we run into the middle of the storm, make sure your ducks are in a row. Make sure that you have taken care of the fundamentals. If that means, as a designer, pulling back from certain commitments like, photography or something like that, so be it. This is just temporary. And I think that's really important also to remember. It feels very dark sometimes. It feels very daunting. There's a lot of things happening all at once right now. It feels like it's never been like that in history before, but I'm sure that it has. There have been times in the past that things have been really, really challenging, and we are going to get through it. And we're going to come out on the other side. I'm an eternal optimist, I should say, but we are going to come out on the other side. And my goal for all of my clients and my wish for everyone is that we are prepared and we all manage to weather the storm.
I agree with you on, I'm talking to several clients now who really are doing extremely well about banking their cash, / making investments in things that make sense, like photography, as you said. But I do think that, things to take advantage of for 2021 are the changes that we're seeing in the home. Pay careful attention to not just the fact that people want a home office. We got that. That's a given. That's right. Now just like having a living room. It's fine. We know about that. So now, what are the other things that people really do require? And Melissa touched on that a little bit about antimicrobial or touchless faucets, having a mudroom, which we never really considered before, but I have a screen porch that has become my mud room. It's like I have a sign on my back door that says, take off your shoes. Don't come in my house with shoes on. And that's for my husband, really. But the point of that, we're wanting to protect our homes, and in any way that we can do that. So that's a trend that we should be paying attention to. Your clients will tell you the way that they want to live. Think about how you want to live. We're going to know where those trends are going before they really get going. But take advantage of what you see happening now. Yeah. Start marketing that, because you can't stop marketing. So marketing. You got to keep it up, even if you feel you're shouting into a void, because they're listening. It's just when they have the money or the opportunity, you want them to think of you first.
Absolutely. That is great advice.
Does anybody else have any questions? You can pop them in the chat. You are welcome, Jeffrey. Anyone else want to put a question for me or Melissa in the chat? I know one thing that Melissa and I should both do is put our email addresses and information into the chat. So I'm going to do that. And Andrew, do you have any other questions for us? And we're waiting for Andrew. Oh, Margaret Russell.
Sorry, hi. I was muted.
We
No, I don't think I do.
We have a question from Margaret Russell.
Hi, Margaret Russell.
So Margaret Russell says, even though it's an incredibly disruptive time, how far do you think ahead, both personally and for business, like 5-year plan, 10-year plan? So I don't actually like doing plans. I do look for trends and I write them down and look for what I think is coming, but that business idea of doing a 5-year plan, I think is a little stodgy. But Margaret knows me well enough to know I do look 10 years out. I do look as far out as possible. And then I kind of bring my scope in. Okay, so if that's what I see 10 years out, what could that mean 7 years out or 5 years out or whatever? But I always try to, when I work with my clients, make them look far further ahead than 1 year. And that's traditionally, I don't know why, but they always want this 1-year plan for next year. And I keep thinking, no, push your focus out further because you've got to be prepared even further out than that. I mean, none of us could have predicted a pandemic, but like I said, those trends were already coming. It's not like they weren't coming, they were just moving slower. So do you do 5 or 10-year plans yourself, Melissa?
Well, personally, I don't do a plan. I think plans, I mean, that dates us, right? What I do is a map, because I have learned over the years that if I have a plan, nothing ever goes to plan in life. You know, life is fluid and organic and all kinds of things happen, like pandemic and who knows what else. So I have a plan. I know where I want to be in 10 years, personally as well as professionally, and I work to that. So that doesn't mean that I'm, totally rigid about it. There needs to be flexibility. That's why that whole idea of failing, whether you fail by accident or you fail on purpose, is failure is feedback. It's, a crossroads, and you get to make another choice, and it will, maybe bring you there by a more circuitous route than you had initially anticipated. So it's a map, really. And I do, when I work with my clients on business strategy, I absolutely, or PR even for that matter, I absolutely think about at least a 3-year plan. I mean, if you're starting with someone who, thinks that they need, lots of PR and thinks that they need a licensing deal and thinks that they need to do a show house, well, you don't just get up one morning and do those things. You have to plan for that. And so, maybe they're going to do Kips Bay, but they're going to do Kips Bay in 2023. And so if that's the time, how do we get there? I think people, they overestimate what they can get done in a year, and they underestimate, or a day, but they grossly underestimate what they can and should and need to get done in a 5 or 10-year plan.
Completely agree. Completely agree.
That's a great question, Margaret. Thank you.
That is a good question.
Yeah.
All right. So Andrew, I don't know how we are on time, or if you have more questions for us too.
I think Jeffrey has one more question about, I always wonder if a business loan is necessary. How do you decide if you need one or not? I've never had a business loan. That's actually a really interesting question. I mean, do you need the money and can you pay it back? Are always my first things, If the loan, if it's a loan that's sort of like a bridge because something is coming, or you need to make an investment that you are fairly confident is going to yield results, I think a loan is a perfectly fine thing to do. But if you don't need one, don't get one. Better to have no debt, I think.
A lot of designers can really operate on such a shoestring. You really can. So even, marketing today doesn't necessarily have to be extremely expensive proposition, thanks to social media and a lot of other things that you can do. So, when you can work from home, and really what you're doing is you're trolling for clients, that's the most important thing that you should be doing right now. Where would you be using that business loan? If you don't have a website, I could understand that maybe, but there's ways of getting around that. There are grants. particularly if you're in a category like women or someone of color. But, you know, a business loan, you have to have the ability and opportunity to pay it back. And in this economy and in this environment, is it that you know you've got a big project coming down the pike and you can pay for it with that? Because if not, I'm not so sure that's such a smart move.
Right. And if it's investment, you know, if you're a product manufacturer, that's a whole other,
That's a completely different story.
completely different question that I'm not really qualified to answer.
I mean, there's just too many variables involved in that where you'd need to really do a more deep dive on your financials and what is, you know, involved in your business, even just from a manufacturing standpoint. I mean, a lot of manufacturers, there has to be a really strong reason for them before they will. Some of the family brand businesses in our industry, they operate on a cash only basis, which always blows my mind. But
I know, so great.
But it's smart. I mean, especially when you hit a situation like this. And then of course, you know, did you get PPP? Did you try for a small business grant? You know, a lot of those were available recently. But really taking out a business loan, I mean, even a bank is going to ask you a lot of questions right now about, well, how are you going to pay this back? You know, so I don't know that that's necessarily the right move for every interior designer right now, for sure. And you are welcome.
Oh, wait, we have one more from Maggie Barringer. What advice do you give your clients about their social media? Some brands and designers are brilliant at hitting the right tone and others seem to be tone deaf. Wow.
I have one that is very important for today, and that is that, first of all, I see you smiling, Andrew, but I wasn't going there. First of all, I think that it's important. A lot of people want to put it on Planoly or Tailwind or whatever and just plan it way out. And that's great. And in the past, that worked fantastically. But you never know what's going to happen day to day. And you better be paying attention, because if you're scheduling things, always think in your mind about what could happen. And then that suddenly sounds incredibly tone deaf, right? Yeah. We've had Black Lives Matter, we've had a pandemic, we've had economic crashes, and even though some of us have been so extremely lucky not to have been impacted in as big a way as some people have been, there are people being evicted who are on the same socioeconomic scale we all are, who don't have any food, whose kids are in trouble. Like, you've got to be really careful today in this environment about what you're posting. And we all know that politically things can get nutso, and like, you need to not be tone deaf right now. That's a very, very good point. And even from the standpoint of showing off your pretty home can sometimes come across as not so on the message. But I think too, it's a matter of paying attention and understanding that yes, you're marketing your business, but there are ways of saying what the caption says, and ways of handling that you should really be paying attention to right now.
100%.
Okay.
And I think,
there is one topic that I don't think we covered, and I know that this is unfair because it is coming to the end point in about 20 minutes, but I think you have people that are really engaged and interested here. So I am going to open this can of worms. So I, in addition to being a contributing editor at Aspire, run a public relations firm, Andrew Joseph PR. And I think one of the qualities that I look for in seeking new clients is someone that has a strong sense of their brand, someone that knows who they are and what they stand for, and have gone through branding exercises, either individually or with a coach like you. Are when you know who you are, it's easier to sell that story. So can you talk a little bit about how people, even if they're maybe not quite at the stage to work with a coach like you, what branding exercises or where you can point them to help them go through that process to even get to the point to work with you?
How are you different? I mean, the thing that I always say to people, and Melissa's going to back me up on this, I know, because when Melissa was on the other side of the table and people were coming to her asking her for licensing, for example, every designer does that, okay? And so you have to say to yourself, how am I different? What makes me stand apart? What's my hook? And whether that's PR, licensing, how you're getting new clients, how you're getting partnerships, any of that, you have to have your own hook. Does it have to be completely different from everybody on the entire planet? No, but you better know what it is. And because that's going to make my job harder, it's going to make Andrew's job harder, it's going to make Melissa's job harder if you cannot articulate who and what you are. And sometimes we can help you articulate that.
Sure.
I can look at how your aesthetic is and how your work looks and say, well, you seem to be moving in this direction. Is that the way it is? But if you can't define that, you're going to make it very difficult to sell you in any way, shape, or form, whether it's licensing, partnership, promotion, PR, whatever.
100%. I fully agree with that. I think, you know, it's about the hook. It's a hook, because if you think about, you know, interior designers, what are the tangible differences? You know, how do you describe your clients, for example? You know, they're well off. Well, those designers' clients are well off. They, you know, are in their 40s, same thing over there. What is that thing that makes you special? Now, obviously, for some, it's you, it's the relationship that you have with the client. But if you're hoping to really develop a brand, you have got to figure out what it is that makes you different from everyone else and what your special sauce is. You know, what is the thing? Why do people listen to you? What can you bring to a manufacturer that they can't get on their own? So I spend a lot of time working with clients on that, because I think people, they know it's inside. You know, it really is inside. I've never worked with anyone before where we weren't able to kind of pull it out, but it's so hard to think about, because that is, it's so close to you, and you're busy having, you know, FOMO, because everyone else seems to be getting a licensing deal and a book deal and better clients and published and all of that. When at the end of the day, like, that's just noise. For you personally, you need to look within and really take the time to figure out, you know, what your unique selling point is.
I like to tell people, remember that that book could be paid for by the designer. Remember that that
Yes.
licensing deal is going to give them 3% on a $50 chair. Do the math. Remember that, you know, all that smoke and mirrors, some of it is smoke and mirrors.
Yes.
And so you can't compare yourself to someone else. But I think, you know, I'll guarantee you that Melissa and Andrew and I can all tell you what our unique selling proposition is, period. I know exactly how to sell myself to someone else, because I look far future. I am known for my straight talk. I'm known for my experience in this industry, and I'm known for being a really good strategizer. So that I can tell you right away that that's what my brand is. And each of these other people on the panel can tell you the same thing. Poor Andrew has received my straight talk. But but that's, you know, that's my brand. It's who I am. I'm known for being honest, very honest. And so that's, you know, that's my hook. And if you don't know your hook, you're going to make your own job and everyone else's jobs more difficult. I mean, really, you shouldn't hire Andrew if you can't articulate it. You just shouldn't.
Right. And that's really a very important thing, because for someone like Andrew, he actually needs assets to work with.
Yes.
He needs, and your brand, your, you know, unique selling point, your hook is actually your brand, because he can't, I mean, he's brilliant, but he can't sort of conjure out of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I do want to point out is it's actually, it feels like it's a lot to figure out. It feels sometimes a little scary. It feels like, you know, wait, I can't figure out how to differentiate myself from anyone else. But the truth is you can. You're just in your way. And so sometimes you need to work with someone like me or Cheminne to just help you get out of the way. Because we see things that you can't see, because we're at 40,000 feet and you're like looking like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes it is.
Well, I think there's.
I know Andrew's going to go there
Go
too.
ahead.
Sometimes it's easier to have people outside looking in at you, because also too, we don't know how we project ourselves to other people. So we're kind of like a mirror that we hold up to you about how your website looks to other people, to a consumer, for example, instead of you thinking, sometimes in our heads, we think, well, that's what I meant for it to say, but it doesn't actually say that.
Right.
So we're the ones that hold the mirror up and say that this is what I see.
I think there's one more topic, and then really we can conclude. And I think maybe you could give some cultural context of coaching, because I think one of the things that we talked about in our planning session that I found very salient, and something the panel or the attendees might find very interesting, is the stigma sometimes that people like, why would I need help? Or I don't want to tell people that I'm working with a business coach. And, you know, like, look at Fortune 500 companies that, like, it is what makes people business leaders.
Everyone has a coach. Everyone has a coach.
Everyone does. And I'll tell you something. So you go out to dinner, you sit down, you're like, oh, my back is killing me. The person you're talking to says, oh my gosh, you need to talk to my chiropractor. Here's their number.
That was a coach.
That was a coach. Everybody, any titan of business, any super successful business person, most presidents, except perhaps our current president, have worked, most athletes, and I don't mean a coach that coaches the team, I mean a performance coach. People, I mean, what stigma? You know, you call up a friend for good advice and direction. That's coaching.
It's really just having someone to keep you on your toes and to hold you accountable, like you originally said. And it can also be a mentor. If you don't like the word coach, try mentor. Or
exactly, change the title.
An advisor, somebody who just helps you step outside of yourself for a minute. I mean, to be honest with you, Margaret Russell is one of my mentors and someone that I've worked with. To just as a friend to call her up and say, what do you think? And bounce ideas off of her. So every single person in this industry and outside, the guy, CEO of Apple, everyone has a coach, advisor, or someone to help them. There is and should be no stigma.
Well, I recently described myself in a business meeting with a client to some external people that I was the fractional VP of sales and marketing. And they were like, oh, we get it. That's exactly what I do, right? So I think we should say coach, you know, over and over until people just, you know, get over it. And that's one of the silver linings. It's like, we all need help. Every single one of us during this pandemic has had to come out in front of our peers and say, I am really struggling. I need help. I am experiencing this. And my hope is that as we move forward, you know, we're just going to be kinder to each other. And so those stigma are going to just go away.
Agreed.
Speaking of being kind to one another, I very much look forward to the day that we can hug once again.
Yes.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful.
Well, I don't think there are any other questions, and I think that this was both entertaining and edifying, and I thank all of the attendees showing up and being engaged, and I hope that you have solid takeaways from this. And I hope you reach out to Cheminne and Melissa because they're both spectacular human beings.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.